Hi, welcome. Have you ever gone to the grocery store and browsed through the fresh bakery department? Looked at all the delicious pastries, some of them really nice and flaky looking, maybe have some kind of fruit filling. Been tempted to make a purchase? Given into that purchase even. So excited about eating that delicious looking pastry. Brought it home, took that first bite. So disappointing, not flaky at all. I would like to share with you a recipe that I created for a nice flaky pastry. Apple turnovers with bourbon soaked raisins. They are so delicious. My family, friends, and most recently my neighbor have enjoyed these pastries, and I hope that they will become something that your family enjoys. The first step is to soak the raisins in some bourbon. But before I do that, let me introduce myself. I'm Joyce, and I want to share this time with you in my kitchen at it's time to cook. So let's get right to soaking those raisins. You're going to measure out a half a cup of raisins. Put those into a small bowl and then measure out 4 tablespoons of bourbon. If you don't care to use spirits when you cook, you could substitute apple juice instead. What the bourbon or the apple juice is going to do is just plump up those raisins and add a different flavor profile to them. I will be using today a Arkansas black apple that I purchased at a local orchard. You could also use a combination of maybe 2 Granny Smith apples and 2 Golden Delicious apples. So then our next step is going to be to peel, slice, and dice the apples. Now I'm going to cut my apples up. First I peel, then I slice and dice. As I mentioned, these are Arkansas blacks, so I'm going to peel with a paring knife. You could also peel with a vegetable peeler. So I just go under the skin. I use my thumb out in front as a guide, and I turn the apple as I peel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a slice off the bottom and just make the bottom nice and level. Then I'm going to make a C with my holding hand, set it down on the top of my apple, make a 1/4 inch slice down the side, a second one, and sometimes you can get a 3rd slice without going into the core. So I have 3 slices here. I'm going to just flip them over and keep them stacked. I'm going to turn my apple around and I'm going to take 3 slices off of the other long side of the apple. Stack those, set them over. And now I'm going to do my 2 little thin side cuts. 3, stack those, set aside, and complete the apple slicing with the other side. Next, I'm going to cut these little thin pieces in half lengthwise and then dice, about a 1/4 inch dice. And remember, if you're not very comfortable with a knife, you want to keep those fingers tucked back so that you don't cut anything off. The next thing we're going to add to our apples is a tablespoon of lemon juice. I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to squeeze some in. And then I'm going to just toss that. And the acid in the lemon juice is going to combine with the sugar, and it's going to make a bit of a balance with the sugar. And you probably are aware that citrus juice also helps prevent cut fruits such as apples from oxidizing or turning brown. The next thing we're going to do is combining the mix that's going to go over the apples. So that's going to be 1/3 cup of brown sugar. And I'm going to start by simply scooping in, packing with my hand, and then turning that out into a small mixing bowl. Then I'm going to add 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Just fill that up. I'm just going to give it a little shake to level it off. That goes into the small mixing bowl. Then I'm going to add 1½ tablespoons of cornstarch. This is going to help to thicken up the sauce that's in the apples when we cook the apples. So that's 1 tablespoon, and then I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon and a teaspoon. And I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of apple pie spice. So I'm going to just get this cornstarch off of my measuring spoon. 1/2 teaspoon of apple pie spice. Dip that right in. And then I'm going to take a small whisk and I'm going to combine those dry ingredients. Just whisk it around a bit and get everything all stirred together. Okay, I think that looks good. Pour that onto the apples. Stir that up so that the apples are coated with the dry. I can smell the apples pie spice. It smells really good, and it's going to add a lot of good flavor. I have my burner on medium heat, and I have preheated my saute pan, which is about a 10-inch saute pan. I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of butter. Let that butter melt. Nice hot pan. And then just put the apples in the pan. Hear the sizzle, and in just a few minutes, we're going to have really good smells here also. Get the liquid in that's accumulated. Spread those out. And then I'm going to just let them saute for 2 to 3 minutes. And what you can do is just leave them and don't disturb them for a few minutes. Next, I'm going to measure out 3/4 cup of apple juice. Apple juice is going to give the filling a little with the flavor of the apples. If you don't have apple juice, you can simply add some water. So I'm going to add apple juice, and I'm going to add the rum-soaked raisins. This is starting to smell very fragrant, especially as the bourbon hits the heat. Now, I'm going to let this saute for about 5 or 6 more minutes until the filling thickens up really nicely from the cornstarch that I put in, and also so that the apples can get nice and soft. Doesn't this look delicious? Notice how nice and thick. Notice the caramel color. And one little tip I want to tell you also is that if you're not a fan of raisins, but you like dried cranberries or craisins, you could substitute craisins. Or if you're not a fan of either, you could just leave them both out and have only apples. We're going to set this aside now and let it cool off so that we can roll and cut our pastry and get these filled and into the oven. The next step is to prepare the pastry. I'm using frozen puff pastry sheets, and I let mine defrost at room temperature for about 40 minutes, but you can also put them in the refrigerator and defrost them overnight. If you're not familiar with puff pastry sheets, there are 2 in a package, and I'm going to take one sheet out of the package. I'm going to return the other sheet to the refrigerator so that it stays nice and cold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sheet some flour on my cooked work surface here. And I'm going to also put some flour on my rolling pin. I have a big heavy-duty professional rolling pin. I really like it because of the weight and the size, and it makes quick work out of rolling dough, but you can also use just a standard size rolling pin. So I'm going to open this up. And what I want to do is I want to roll this gently so that I have it about 12 inches by 12 inches. So when you're rolling out dough, you want to start in the middle and you want to roll forward, come to the middle, and move back. Forward, middle, back. Then do some side to side, same way. And in this case, I want to try to keep my pastry rectangular, or I'm sorry, to make it into a square, because I need it to be 12 by 12. And the length of this dough is about 2 inches short. So once I get it rolled to size, then I want to cut it into equal squares for my turnovers. And you notice I have it a little crooked here, so you can take your hand and kind of even it back up. You can also take just a section of the rolling pin and just put the weight on that section, and that will help you roll your dough and keep it square, rectangular, whatever it is you need. We don't want to roll this out too much more. So I'm going to stop right there. Now what you can do if you like is just take a knife and square up those edges. That way you only have just a little bit of waste, but you're going to have a squared up piece to work with. So what I want to do now is to cut it in thirds lengthwise. You can use a ruler if you like, but I'm going to just kind of estimate the size here, and I'm going to make 3 cuts this way, and then I'm going to make 3 cuts this way, getting them fairly even in size. Okay, now these are ready to make into turnovers. So what we're going to do is we're going to put filling in the center here and then fold them over. And so that's why you want them to be fairly square, so that when you turn it over, they're going to have an even shape and the edges will line up. Now the pastries are ready to fill. So what I'm going to do is use two called teaspoons, but they're actually from your flatware service. And I'm going to put about a heaping teaspoon in the center of the turnover. And I'm going to spread it just a little bit. And I like to just move some of those raisins over so that they're evenly distributed. Then I'm going to take, I have 1 egg white that I have added 1 tablespoon of water to, using a pastry brush, and just pat the sides so it's not too wet. And then I'm going to go around all 4 corners and wet the edge of the pastry so that it will stick. Then I'm going to fold over, kind of stretching and making the edges come together like so, and pressing down so that I get a nice seal. Move that back just a bit. And then I'm going to take, this happens to be a little salad fork, and I'm going to just crimp the edges. And once I get these on the pan, I'm going to go back and brush them all, the tops, with egg white. That's just to help ensure that we get a nice golden brown. And as you can see, these are small. There's 9 with this cut that I made. So these are going to be mini turnovers. And I think they're just kind of fun to have. Just a little, if you want just a little bit of sweet pastry, or if you want a lot, then you could have a couple or more. Pull over, get those edges to line up. And what you want to do is try to make sure that you have all those edges sealed. Otherwise, you're going to have that nice yummy filling oozing out the edges of your pastries. And so I'm going to continue with the other 7. I want to share with you this parchment paper that I love to use. You can buy it on the roll, and sometimes it's a little tedious to tear it off straight and get it to fit exactly on these sheet pans. Often I have to turn something under, but the Reynolds kitchen cooking baking sheets are perfect for half sheet pans. And if you have a novice baker, especially a novice cookie baker in your home, these are wonderful for them because they have little grids on them. And so when you're dropping cookies on the tray and you need them to be a certain distance apart so that they don't run together, these papers are perfect. And another tip is these baking sheets can be used several times, so you don't have to discard it after every use. So I have 8 of the pastries on the pan. I'm going to save the other little one to go on the second pan that I make. And for the egg whitewash, I'm just lightly brushing the tops again so that they will have a really nice golden brown color. And you don't want to make these too wet. So whether you're spreading melted butter or some kind of an egg wash, usually it's a good idea to go with a lighter hand and just do a little tap tap on the edge of your bowl so that you get some of that excess off and you don't wet down your pastry or whatever you're trying to cover. And then these are going to go into the refrigerator because with a puff pastry, it is made with layers of butter. It's called laminated dough. So it's rolled, spread with butter, turned, rolled again, and the butter needs to stay chilled so it makes those nice flaky layers. And now these are going to go into the refrigerator so that they stay nice and cold while I roll out the next sheet. And for this one, I'm only going to make 4 large turnovers. The apple turnovers are out of the oven. They have been cooling on a wire rack for about 15 minutes. They were baked at 400 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes, and they were baked in the middle rack, 1 pan at a time. I have made a glaze of 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and about 1½ tablespoons of half and half. And I mix that up, and what you want this to look like is when you drop it, you want it to look like kind of thick ribbons. So I'm going to just take that now and drizzle it over, and I pull it up high like so and get it started, and then drizzle over. Go back, get it going in the bowl so you're not wasting, and then get it going, drizzling over the turnovers. I'm going to do about half of these with the glaze, and the other half I'm going to cover with powdered sugar. So I'm using a little sifter and just tap, tap, tap from the side of the sifter and just dust with powdered sugar. Oh, yum. Some of you are in cold parts of the country where you've already seen snow falling, so this must remind you, of that. Now, these are ready to serve and taste. Can't wait. Apple turnovers with bourbon soaked raisins. The next time you're in the grocery store and you're tempted to buy those pastries, just remember, no, no, no. Buy the ingredients for these turnovers instead and go home and make your own. I would like to leave you with 2 final tips. Tip number 1 is, when you have these left over, if that's possible, then you can preheat your oven to 400 degrees and pop these back in the oven for about 3 to 5 minutes. And that's going to crisp up those flaky layers again and make them just as delicious as they were when they were fresh out of the oven. The second tip I'd like to leave you with is, because there are 2 packages of dough in each box, you could make half the first day and then put the remainder in the refrigerator and make them the next day, maybe for breakfast, to have with a cup of coffee or my personal favorite, chai tea latte.